Thanks for tuning in to the Lean 911 podcast, where you'll have a voice directly from the Gemba. I will rely on my 3 decades of Lean successes as well as my failures to answer your most challenging questions regarding your Lean transformation. I'm your host, Mark DeLuzio, President and CEO of Lean Horizons Consulting and the Principal Architect of the Danaher Business System. Looking forward to your questions. Now, let's go to the Gemba. Hi, Mark DeLuzio here with episode 14. This is called 10 Rules of Kaizen. This is going to be a 3-part series on Kaizen. I get a lot of questions about Kaizen. I think the notion in what a Kaizen really is has been very diffused over the years. It's different than when I started some 30 years ago. Seems like everybody was on the same page at that point in time. Now I think there's a huge confusion about what this is. And there's also an aversion to wanting to spend the time on it, by senior leaders especially, which is really something else. But anyway, I'm going to talk about the whole concept of Kaizen in a 3-part series. As we move through, I might have a 4th down the line and a 5th. Who knows? It's a big subject. But this one's going to be the 10 rules of Kaizen that we learned from Chihiro Nakao and Shingijutsu, and also Yoshida Iwata and the whole Shingijutsu group. Comes right out of Toyota. That would be episode 1 of 3 for Kaizen. Part 2 is going to be the pitfalls of Kaizen. And what are the pitfalls? There's a lot of them. We'll talk about that. And 3, we're going to talk about the anatomy of a Kaizen. And I'm going to do that by talking about the Kaizen report out, because if you start with the end in mind, you can actually see what the anatomy looks like of the parts of a Kaizen that need to happen. All right. So let's talk about the 10 rules of Kaizen. And the very first rule is to throw out traditional concepts. What are traditional concepts? Things that you always taken for granted. Not challenging, just accepting everything that comes your way. I was at a client not too long ago. They showed me a specification for a process. And I said, well, where did that number come from? Why is it 60 liters? Show me how you got that. And geez, that's a nice round number, you know? So they looked at it, and they verified it, and they found out, you know what? It only needs to be 30. Okay. And so why does it have to cure for 48 hours? When I challenged at a particular business and we did some studies, it was only 20 minutes that it needed to cure. Okay. Talking about a part, cooling off and curing. So there'll be a lot of traditional concepts that you'll just take for granted in a Kaizen, and that will limit the improvements that you're going to make, because quite frankly, you're not going to be able to get past things that were always accepted as true. And you don't want to do that. Rule 2, keep an open mind to change. How many times have you said, that's not going to work? We already thought of that, right? Keep an open mind to change. I've seen this time and time again. Matter of fact, when we learned 3P from Nakao, he taught us the spirit of 7 alternatives, where he said, when you have a problem, try to think of 7 solutions, as crazy as they might be. You might think of 3 or 4, but those last few are really tough to get. And that 6th or 7th one might spur an 8th one that nobody ever thought of, because it's all about brainstorming and unlocking the brain and preconceived notions that we all have about how things go. And by the way, the longer that you're working in a business, and it's human nature, it happened to me as well, the more you're going to accept the abnormal as normal. Okay. And you won't see things as clearly as somebody coming in from the outside for the first time, just asking a question like, why are you guys doing that? So keep an open mind to change. And 3, rule number 3 is do not accept excuses. How many times have you heard, oh yeah, that will work, but you got to understand. Okay. Or you don't know our business, or, you need to know us better. I don't want to know you. You're losing money. Okay. I mean, if you knew us better, you'll know why we're doing what we're doing, right? So don't accept excuses. A lot of times I call this the butt monkey. Oh, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. But let me tell you why you're wrong, right? Call that the butt monkey. A lot of butt monkeys out there, right? So do not accept excuses. And as a matter of fact, so many times I see people pushing back on somebody else's idea because they're picking that 5% of the time that something might happen. All right. 5% of the time. You can't do that because on Tuesday afternoon, if there's a tornado, a blizzard, and a hurricane, then we're not going to be able to do that. I mean, that kind of craziness has to go away, which leads me into the fourth rule, which is don't seek perfection, right? Everybody's looking for the most elegant, perfect solution, and they don't exist. And every solution is going to have its holes in it. Every solution is going to have an exception somewhere where it doesn't always work. That's okay. The whole notion is don't let perfect get in the way of better because you could stagnate on a particular issue and you'll end up, quite frankly, looking at each other trying to get that last 10% and arguing, spending most of your time on that. Put the 60, 70% solution in place and move on. You'll find that once you start working it, it might not be perfect, but it will start opening up some doors for you. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So don't seek perfection and don't let perfect get in the way of better. Step 5, correct mistakes the moment they're found. So many times I see in a Kaizen, okay, put that on the Kaizen newspaper. If you don't know, and you'll find this in part 3, a Kaizen newspaper are a list of things that have to be done that the team wasn't able to do during the week of the Kaizen. I like to target 0 items on a Kaizen newspaper because so many times we put things on there and we leave at 4 or 5 o'clock and we don't get things done. In the old days, we were working Kaizens 18, 19, 20 hours a day. Now I see we start Kaizens. The mantra today on a lot of companies is we're going to start at 8, 8:30. We're going to go to about 4 or 5, and then we'll pick it up the next day. And that's not the dedication you need to really make meaningful change. So limiting things on the Kaizen newspaper and try to correct something right away, even if it's an imperfect way to do it. A lot of times you have to, what we call try-storming, where you try something. Try something with a piece of cardboard or a piece of plywood. It doesn't have to be permanent. Just experiment. Experiment as much as you can when you're in a Kaizen. But correct mistakes the moment they're found, and don't find yourself always, populating the Kaizen newspaper with things that should have been done during the Kaizen. Step 6, think creativity before capital. Now I have a whole uh, episode on Lean 911, one of the episodes earlier on how to look at capital equipment, right? And the questions you have to ask whether or not if you're going to be authorized from a lean perspective to buy that piece of capital. So creativity before capital. So many times people on Kaizens want to go buy a solution. Mikhail used to call the engineers who wanted to do this catalog engineers. They sit behind a computer, they get on the McMaster car or or some other supplier's catalog, and they buy a solution. He called them catalog engineers. He would go up to them and look at their hands and see if they're dirty. If they weren't dirty, he'd send them out to the shop floor and say, "Don't come back until your hands are dirty." So he detested catalog engineers. And this whole idea of thinking creativity before capital is really key. And in that capital equipment episode, you can hear a lot of stories about how you could save millions of dollars if you think. And another way to say this is use your brain before your wallet, right? It's another way to say this. Step 7 or rule 7, problems give you the chance to use your brain. Now, a lot of cultures you walk into where people have not been asked to think. They've been told what to do by leadership. The place is a mess, and leaders think, well, geez, the employees are doing a bad job, but they haven't opened up the channels for them to participate and change and give their input. And I still believe that the lowest level in the organization are the best consultants, the people doing the work, right? And I see cultures where they're just not used to that, and also they don't have the culture where you could take a risk and make a mistake. And if you make a mistake, that's okay, as long as you're using your brain and keep moving it forward, right? So problems do give you a chance to use your brain, and sometimes that's easier said than done, depending on the fundamental nature of the culture of the company. Ask why 5 times. This is a 5 why analysis, but the best question you can ask is why? Why do you do that? Why do you cure those parts for 48 hours? Gee, that's a nice even number. Is that an engineering spec? Why is it 48 hours? Okay. And as I said earlier, it turned out to be 20 minutes. Why do you guys do that? Why is that spec the way it is? Why do you guys put that over there? Why does it go to the warehouse? Why doesn't it go right to the next process? Why, right? Keep asking why, because as you ask why, you can get to a point where people can't answer you, which is really an opportunity for you to dive in and really understand what's going on, right? Number 9, leave titles at the door. Easier said than done. When the CEO comes in on a Kaizen team, everybody knows that person's the CEO, and, not always that easy. But how you conduct yourself with the title that you hold, this is hard to do. I've experienced this a lot where a leader will come in and give all the answers. I once said to a leader, wait a minute, you've been here for 25 years. You don't have the answers because look at the mess this place is in, okay? You don't have the answers. So take your place amongst the Kaizen team and please, participate as a member, not as a leader, right? So leaving your titles at the door where everybody's equal from the janitor to the CEO, again, easier said than done, but it's got to be that thought process where everybody participates. And that's where the facilitator comes in terms of making sure they get the best out of everybody on the team. And then the last one is improvement knows no limits. So once you think you've got this elegant solution and you put it in place, maybe a very good solution. But the thing about this is Kaizen opens doors that were closed before. So those future improvements are, in fact, the doorway to the next step in improvements. The worst thing the leader could do is come in and say, on a Kaizen report out or a review, say, why don't you guys think of this? Why don't you guys think of that? Why don't you do that? And my answer is, again, how long you been here? Why don't you think of it? This team opened up the door for you to see before those doors were closed, sometimes closed by you, right? So improvement knows no limits. Now, there's other rules I can add to this, but I want to stick with these 10 right here for now. And I think the whole notion of pitfalls and how people behave in Kaizens or outside of Kaizens is, you could argue, it's another set of rules that we'll talk about. So the next step is going to be part 2, the pitfalls of a Kaizen. So I'll leave it here with the 10 rules of Kaizen engagement. Again, coming right from our friends at Shingijutsu. And we'll leave it at that. If there's any questions, please email me at mark@lean911.com. That's M-A-R-K, mark@lean911.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Lean 911 podcast. I'll be happy to address your questions or feedback on future episodes. Email me at mark@lean911.com. You can check out our other episodes by visiting our website at lean911.com, our YouTube channel, wherever you listen to podcasts. This is your host, Mark DeLuzio. Thanks for listening.